Okay, so I mean, what I'll really say is the Linux file system is not difficult. I will agree to anyone that says because it's different means you have to basically stop and just do a little bit of learning. Now, here's the real great part about getting started in Linux. 99.99999% of your time for the first year of running it, I'll say, unless you get really adventurous,
Mhm.
you're only going to have to know really two folders, I'll say. And that is slash home and slash media. And the reason I
Okay.
say home is because really the home folder is where virtually everything is stored at. Everything you care about is basically in the home folder. And the media is just how you access thumb drives and CD drives. So you don't really have to know what all the other folders mean. Not in the beginning. You know, I always encourage people to baby step. The file system is something I kind of encourage people, don't go too far ahead. Wait till you have a reason to know what a certain folder is or does.
Okay. Now, if you're looking at your drives, though, in a graphical user interface environment,
Mhm.
then does what you say just said still hold?
Well, you don't really need to know where your drive is mounted unless you want to copy um copy or paste via the command line, or there's another tool that is asking you where is your thumb drive, because really all you got to
Okay.
do is open up that file browser and just click on the left hand side, and just like any other modern operating system, you can very easily drag and drop to and from the thumb drive or from the CD-ROM drive or from or to a network share, just, you know, like any other operating system, just dragging and dropping. So you really don't have to know where media is at, but it's good to know just in case you put your thumb drive in, you don't see it yet. You can just go there to verify whether or not it's actually being mounted correctly.
Okay. Good tip. Yeah. Good tip.
Okay, the first actual topic I wanted to mention was actually a link from the Linux Basics forums, and I want to say it was from Twisted Lucid, I think is the name, and I probably just really hammered and butchered it kind of badly. But there is a page over at HP, and everyone, to be honest, who has ever dealt with me in the past has a pretty firm understanding of how I think and feel about HP. Not really a big fan of them, but I'll say,
Are you a big fan of anything other than Linux?
uh, yes.
Okay. Well, moving right along to the HP page.
Um, I actually like installing their printers in Linux because it literally takes me 15 seconds, 20 seconds to install a printer in Linux. That's an HP printer. On Windows, I think it's the most painful thing I ever did. I think their laptops are some of the most janky devices I've ever touched. Their desktops are okay, but most desktops are just desktops. Um, but I gotta say, they have a school, basically, free courseware, I'll say, online. And then the link's going to be in the show notes. It's a little unique. h30187.www3.hp.com slash all underscore courses.jsp. There's a lot of stuff on this page that's not Linux specific. So even if you're not interested in learning Linux, highly encourage you to go to this page. I took a dabble at like 4 or 5 of the courses, pretty high quality and very clearly written. I definitely like what I'm seeing. And they have everything from a Adobe Photoshop CS4 stuff, digital photography, um, Photoshop, scanning basics, Facebook and Twitter getting started. Yes. So when someone asks you what is Facebook, just send them here. Just send them the link. Microsoft Excel, Word 2007, Networking 101, all kinds of stuff. Down towards the very bottom, under I believe it's IT professionals, which of course is the very last group. There's well over, I would say, 150 courses here. There's 3 courses. They're called Linux 201, Administering Linux for Users, Linux 301, Introduction to Linux System Administration, and Linux 401, Intermediate System Administration Skills. I guarantee you, if you only intend to use Linux on your laptop or on your personal desktop, going to these courses will still give you education, insight, and tools and techniques that you can use on your home computer and home network. One of the things I like about Linux is that the same basic kernel, I can basically transform almost any Linux into anything else. And what I mean by that is GNU Linux. I can take a Ubuntu install, desktop edition, go into Synaptic, get rid of some stuff, add some stuffs, and then I basically transform that into Ubuntu server.
Now, you're not talking emulation. You're talking about a full transgenderation, huh?
Yeah, basically ripping the innards out and putting different ones in. And I can take Ubuntu GNOME, open up Synaptic Package Manager or Ubuntu Software Center, and I can actually install Kubuntu. And then when that is installed and I boot to that, I can actually get rid of GNOME altogether. So I can transform one desktop into another desktop, or from a desktop into a server environment. Now, the reason why I'm saying these classes are relevant, that means the core competencies that hold this operating system together on the desktop are a lot in the same line as the administration of business class computers for these same operating systems. It isn't like there's really a lot of different versions. There might be just different tools you use to utilize configurations. So you can do the same basic things on your netbook that you can do on a $25,000 server with 35 cores. It would just be slower.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do encourage anyone with any time on their hands at all. They don't want to have the laid back experience of TV, but they want the lean forward experience of interacting and stuff. Go to this HP site, look at these courses, find something that interests you, and just go through it, or at least go through the beginning of it. The range of courses is what blows me away.
Are these the only Linux courses that the HP site is offering?
These are the only ones that are specific to Linux. Now, they have virtualization. I'm sorry, virtualize your infrastructure, which kind of has to deal with Linux because VMware is the prominent virtualization tool, and it basically runs on Red Hat. So there are other topics in here that deal with Linux, but they're not geared towards Linux experiences of administration. Like they have servers 101. That tells me it's more along the lines of the hardware, not operating system specific. So that could still apply too. But there, all kinds of wireless tutorials, courses also. So there's a bunch more that can apply to Linux, but those are the only ones that are specifically geared with Linux in the title and the, the actual naming structure.
Okay, cool. Hey, I got a question for you. It seems like every couple of months, a new version of Ubuntu is released. Is there any rhyme or reason to how and when new versions of Ubuntu come out?
Yeah, it's actually Ubuntu is on a 6-month release cycle. Some distributions are on 10-month or 12-month or 14-month. Some versions are on a when we're ready, we'll release schedule kind of thing.
Hmm.
Ubuntu kind of very early on made it very demanding on themselves. They want to be constantly doing updates, constantly innovating, constantly in approving things. So they every 6 months have a new version or release. Now, once every 2 years, there's the long-term support edition, which is what I really encourage all new users to really jump into first. The last long-term support edition was 10.04. With that said, there's been 10.10 and then 11.04. They're not long-term support versions, so they're not made with the goal of being the most stable experience you have.
Hmm.
You might install it and have a perfectly stable experience. You might install it and have messages popping up once in a while saying something crashed, something did not load correctly. And I think that could bitter that could turn the new user a little bit bitter about the experience. So I always encourage them to stick with the long-term support versions. And every 2 years they're released and they're supported for 3 years. So you can download 10.04 now. You will keep getting patches, keep getting updates until 2013 April. Now, 2012 April is the next long-term support edition. So technically you could stay on the old one for 3 years, wait for the new one to already be a year seasoned. So then you're basically guaranteed a pretty, actually very stable experience. But yeah, they're on 6 months. Most other distributions are like a 10-month, 12-month, and 14-month release schedules.
Okay.
There was a link at ubuntu.com where they actually have a graphical representation. And I'm not going to lie, I needed this graphical representation so I could really comprehend the benefit to the long-term support and how you really can be on the most stable of Ubuntu distributions and not be on the next stable one until it's already been out a year. So you're pretty assured of most bugs being just obliterated and out of the system.
Speaking of bugs and that kind of thing, tips, tweaks, anything that you can recommend for the latest release of Ubuntu? The Natty Narwhal, I believe it's called.
Yeah, and well, I gotta say that's one of the things that almost upsets me about Ubuntu, and that is the naming convention of them. And it's basically because I hold a grudge. When I started, they were on D's already, Dapper Drake. Then it went to E, Edgy F, Feisty Fawn, G, I can never remember, and so forth and so on. But when they got to H, they should have made it Hungry Hippos, and they didn't. And I'm scorned, and I'm still scorned since that they decided to name it Hardy Heron. And now it's a Natty Narwhal, and next it's like a ocelot something.
Overeating ostrich or something.
Yeah, it's something very non-North American most of the time because this basically comes out of South Africa. So most of the time they're African animals, creatures, things.
So,
But
so nutty names aside,
yeah.
what can you offer the new user that's just firing up 11.04 and they want to get it a little bit more robust and more to their liking? What you got for them?
Well, one of the biggest gripes people had about 11.04 when it first came out was the lack of customization. Customability. I'm sticking with that. And there's a link over on webupd8.org. They actually have a lot of good thing, and it's web update UPD8. They actually have more than a couple good links on this site every week. This one is an extremely long list of things to do to tweak Ubuntu 11.04. They say tweak slash fix because some people say it's broken. I don't look at it like that. I think it's just too early in the dev period to be an actual, it's like a beta, I'll say. And I know it's not a beta release. People will get mad at me, but it's really not done, polished up. You know, there's still kinks and they're still getting worked out. But a lot of the things they have in here will help make that experience easier to deal with, easier to put up with, and just the ability to change things that might nag you. This list is super long, from installing Compiz config settings manager to do some really lightweight tweaking, to how to hide files from appearing in the dash search, how to get heads up to display of your RAM and CPU usage, how to get Dropbox stats built into your Me menu, on and on and on and on. And the best thing I can say about virtually everything I saw here is virtually none of this will slow down your Ubuntu experience. And that's one of the things I think I noticed after years of Windows. It seemed like it got to a point where everything I added to enhance my experience weighed down on the processor, weighed down on the RAM, until I had a computer that should have been lightning fast and it was slower than I thought it should be. Most of these things are not really things that are running all the time. They're just changes to the interface and displaying information that's already on the computer. So there's no more extra horsepower that have to go into it. I've had 2 people comment to me on this page and say, you know, they only needed like 20% of it, but Lord, they really like that 20% and how they were able to fix what they did not like.
Hey, let me ask you a question though. Suppose you applied, a tweak that you got from the webupdate.org site, and you might have installed it wrong, or there might have been something buggy with the fix. Does Linux have anything like Windows one-click fix that, well, for better or for worse, does seem to work more often than it doesn't, at least to me? Is there anything like that for Linux?
Well, yeah, and I'll say I'm the kind of guy, I kind of break everything I touch. My phone I can't power off anymore without a screwdriver. I kind of break everything. Ubuntu is not immune from file permissions getting messed up, or a install goes bad and now you're like stuck between 2 desktops kind of thing. It is definitely possible. There's a tool over omgubuntu.uk. I've never heard of it. I'm really hoping someone in the last week actually sent me an email and said they were suffering from one of these problems so I could have them test it out on the fly, but that didn't happen. There's a tool called YEO Works, YEO Works, and what this aims to be the best way I can explain this to a Windows user, it's kind of like Dial-A-Fix, where it can go through your system and basically perform checks. And if it finds those mistakes or errors or corruptions, it can automatically fix it without you having to do anything, really. For instance, a lot of people who downloaded 11.04 tried to put GNOME 3, which is the non-Unity desktop interface, which is basically the bizarro version of Unity is the best way I can say. And that's insulting GNOME, so that's not nice. Because I actually like GNOME 3 a lot. I think it's going to be very superior very shortly. But when you try to install it on 11.04, it doesn't jive well with Unity, so stuff has a tendency to break. There's a simple checkbox in this interface. You just click and hit OK, and it will go and on its own, fix stuff, clean your system, change root or user password, fixing Flash 64-bit issue, which anybody on Linux and 64-bit knows Flash can go bonkers
Hmm.
and just start to not work. It also has a tool in here I never actually seen. It can convert a 32-bit .deb in a install package into a 64-bit .deb install package. I didn't know that was even possible, but it is. And it's a tool called YEO Works. YEO Works, I
Yeah,
think.
works. Hmm.
I'll go with you. You're a doctor.
Yeah, take my prescription and pronounce things the way I do. Yes.
Exactly. And I gotta say, this next one, Doc, I almost laughed out loud. This was an email from Steve C. And I'll tell you right now, I don't get too many emails from people that catch this kind of stuff before I do, because this was absolutely great. Audor 2 is a very sophisticated, very complex DAW, digital audio workstation, maybe. I'm thinking. I don't know. It's a hardcore audio. I don't want to say editor because that's limiting it. There's a lot you can do in this tool with audio. Record multiple tracks, split tracks, all kinds of fancy music composer type stuff that I don't know anything about. Okay. On creatingmusic.com, they had an interview with the lead dev, I believe it is. The project lead. And they asked him if he wanted to say something about the new version. Okay. The project lead of Audor 2 was asked to comment on the newest version of Audor 2. And this is what he said. Audio on Linux sucks. You can't make music on it. There are no soft synths. My plugins don't run. Nobody can configure Linux. My hardware doesn't work on Linux. It can't open Pro Tools sessions. It doesn't do MDI sequencing, which makes it about 10 years behind the curve. Reaper is better and changing faster. It doesn't run on Windows. Why bother?
And this came from the guy that's behind the Adore 2 project?
The project lead.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, what the interviewer basically said, okay, sorry to disappoint you trollers, but he just took all of your ammunition away. So here's the thing, okay? Really high-end, sophisticated tools, period, on Linux. Most of them have such high ambitions that they're never, ever, ever caught up to where they want to be. And I think this is this guy's example of how we have a long way to go to meet our own personal goals. I know 2 or 3 people that have used this tool in the past, and they said it was great, fantastic for higher end audio manipulation, I'll say. I honestly partially think he said this just to get attention. And I say it's genius. But I also believe he basically just wanted to take the haters and say, now say something I didn't say, kind of thing. I already said it. I already admitted everything you're going to say bad about this product. Because I don't know about you, Doc, but I've never ran a piece of software that was perfect. There was always something missing, or it didn't work exactly how I wanted it to work. So really, to me, this is his admonishment. The product isn't perfect, period.
Well, overall, let me ask you, what do you think of Linux audio? Is it as weak as he says, or?
No. Here's the thing. if you have basic or semi-basic needs, Linux is very, very, very capable of doing everything you need to do. Example is Audacity. Audacity is a audio editor, transformer,
Hmm.
transcoder, all that kind of stuff. If you have a single track file and it's not hours long, it is a very solid, stable tool that works pretty quick to do all the transforming and the fading and the splitting and the merging. All you need to do perfectly fine. If you start adding a lot of tracks, and by a lot of tracks, I mean even 4 or so, and they're like an hour long each, it will crash to the nth degree. Once you
Hmm.
start over demanding that application, it, you outgrow its powers. Then you have to jump to the next level. And that's where those tools have admonished for a couple years. They're not up to where they want to be. There's actually a couple of them. Adore is the only one that comes to mind, where they have very high expectations for themselves, and they basically want to be as good as the Pro Tools of the world.
Hmm.
They don't want to just be an end user tool. They want to be the stuff that people in the booth use when they're doing audio intensive task. So for me and my needs, it's no perfectly fine.
Hmm.
I'm not a sound engineer. I'm not making music. I'm not choreographing or producing an album.
Well, does one distribution of Linux handle audio better than any other or differently?
Well, yes. Oh, yes. One of the biggest gripes a guy named Brian Lunduke made, he for the last couple of years, he goes to the Northwest Linux conference and holds a talk in one of the rooms called "Why Linux Sucks" or "How Linux Sucks" or something like that. One of his biggest gripes is the number of sound processors in the background. Um, there's OSS, ALSA, Pulse, and I think there's a couple more. These are basically the engine behind the audio for the operating system.
Hmm.
Since there's so many of them, one district could be using one district could be using another. So it's supposedly harder for the audio programmer to, know which one you're using and make all the catches for the ones that they're using. Because of that, supposedly Linux is behind in audio. One of the golden like things about Linux is choice. If there was only one audio thing, it would only be like that for a day, because it will
Hmm.
not do something that some audio file needs to happen, and there would very quickly be a second one.
Hmm.
Because some of them do multi-channel great. Pulse Audio, which is in Ubuntu, does not do what's called real-time processing for audio great. So you have to get rid of Pulse to do real-time audio, from what I hear. And because Linux is choice, you can download specific distributions that are specifically geared towards audio creation, multimedia creation. There was one that Jonathan Nadal found that was a basically like a turned your computer into a magical black box amplifier for your guitar, to where you could make your guitar sound like anything.
Hmm.
So there's plenty of sound stuff out there. It's just a question of what sound needs could you need. And I virtually guarantee you there's a distribution out there specifically geared towards that one niche need.
Well, if
Um,
you were trying to decide which distro you were going to use based on your needs, do you have any resources that the newbie could go to look at the different distributions out there, or at least what the top 10 distributions are?
well, I always try to steer people towards more popular distributions, and it's not because they're better. In fact, because they're popular does not mean they're better. And the analogy I use is Britney Spears won Grammys, don't mean she's any good. You know, Jimi Hendrix only had one top 40 hit in his whole life, and he's epic. Um, there's a link over at itmanagement.earthweb.com, but the site's called Datamation. I don't understand that, but me and Steve went through this before. They have a link on there which they say is the top 50 distributions for Linux. Now, I always encourage people to stick with something popular because it's so well supported. And I don't mean by the software creators, I mean by the community. The community always does better jobs of listening to you, admonishing, acknowledging your issue, and helping you resolve that issue better than the organization. Because the organization, you know, they only deal with the top 80% of the problem, and if your issue doesn't fall in that top 80% of that problem, they don't deem it an important enough issue. Where the community, they don't care. There's guys who are just thriving to make you happy. You know what I mean? So they just basically sit around the forums and they wait for a new posting to come up about audio. This guy posted about audio. Great. Let me see if I can help him. And they'll go out of their way to try to give you a hand and help you find a solution. What this list is, what they deem to be, and they probably got their numbers from the individual distributions themselves of how popular they are. So it's the top 50 Linux distributions. And I gotta say, there's over 600 distributions right now that are active. These are just the top 50. So, and I tell you, there is a bell curve of very popular, and then it very quickly slides down in the numbers.
Okay, quick question. What do you mean by distributions that are active? You mean ones that are being updated?
Yeah, because there's over, I want to say on DistroWatch, over 400 that have been dormant for a year. So you can probably, in some cases, even still download them, but don't expect to get updates. Don't expect to get help, but they do exist. I always want to stick with something active because I know if I have a problem with it, there's at least some people using it still that can offer me some help in some way. And just to go down the first 10 real quick, Ubuntu is number 1, Red Hat is number 2, Debian is number 3, SUSE, and I'm guessing they mean, no, they mean SUSE, and it's not SUSE, it's SUSE. I gotta get that finish down right. Number 5, Linux Mint. Number 6, Slackware. Number 7, Gentoo. Number 8, Arch Linux, and the guy who did the page can't code right. Number 9, Fedora. And number 10, OpenSUSE.
I'm surprised to hear Red Hat so high up the list. I thought Red Hat was old hat nowadays.
Well, to be honest, it is old. Not going to argue that, I'd be a fool. But they have honestly been so successful in the last couple years in their business of just getting Red Hat servers into companies, partially because Fedora and CentOS, they learn from those two distributions are much more bleeding edge, and they teach Red Hat basically how to do things right. It's a parent-child like relationship. Because of that, Red Hat gets the communities to basically develop really cool tools, and Red Hat, of course, has staff of people that basically are only in Red Hat. So you know the tools, they're made for the operating system, so they're going to work the best in that operating system. Red Hat is very, very stable in the enterprise. I know, to be honest, at the place I work, it was over a year and a half before we rebooted the Red Hat server. And it was only because we did a distribution upgrade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That speaks a lot for the stability of Red Hat.
Yeah, and I mean, it has been around a long time. It hasn't been flashy. It hasn't been making all this kind of news, but they have been a very successful business in making money
Mm-hmm.
And basically they offer support. Support is, what they do best. And I gotta say, I really like what they're doing. I really like what they're doing for the community. I like what they're doing for Linux. And I'm happy to see that they're number two, to tell you the truth.
Well, good. And two, I was kind of surprised that Mint was so far down the list. I would have thought that it would have been higher up.
Well, I think, okay, if we look at just home users, Mint is very close to number one. Very, very, very close to number one. Mm-hmm. Red Hat is in a lot of business servers. Debian is on a lot of internet servers. And SUSE is the paid version of the OpenSUSE desktop for businesses.
Okay.
In the US, I know you walk into any business and you can bet a week worth of lunches they're going to be running either Windows XP or Windows 7. And you're going to be right so often. It's unbelievable. Around the world, that's not the case, really. Windows is not as prominent in other countries as much as it is here. Now, granted, there are other countries where it's just as popular or even more popular. But there are many countries out there where Linux and BSD-based systems are much, much, much more normal, the status quo, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that's the very next link. Wow, I actually did a segue, Doc. This is at h-online.com, and I actually found, I think I was actually sent this link. This links the top 20 Linux countries based on local desktop OS market share. Jeez. And Cuba leads the list, and I'm sure you know why they lead the list, Doc. Because the U.S. still has the embargo, I believe it is, on Cuba, to where we still can't get Cuban cigars, and apparently they can't get Microsoft. So
I think we're losing out more than Cuba is, though.
well, and number two on the list is Venezuela, which I think is some sort of tyranny as well. But for the rest of the world, they're using Linux a lot more on average than America. I want to say US was on this list, but it was something like 35. It was definitely down the list a little ways. And I think it's primarily just because Microsoft is made in the Northwest. It's in the same country. And some people believe, we support our own country by buying something built in this country.
How is Linux's presence in the UK? I have a feeling it's very strong over there.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like in the UK, I want to say they were like, UK is just below the global mean, which is 0.73%. So they're just below the world average on computers. So they're not really where I would like them to be, but I honestly feel like it's only a matter of time before that changes. Okay, the next link, and this was the kind of thing I was really questioning whether or not to bring up on the show, Doc. Backup tools are dime a dozen on every operating system. I mean, you can get, like on Windows, as simple and as non-complex as SyncToy for free, or you can get complete, hard drive imaging tools and all this kind of stuff for free. It's the same thing on Linux. There's 1,000,000,001 tools to do all kinds of backup. But I wanted to talk about this tool from Archaea. I want to say Archaea. I wanted to mention this backup tool because this is a network backup tool that can actually do bare metal backups over the network with a local client on that operating system. So your server can be in the back in the closet with extra drive space on it. Your desktop or laptop can be running Linux. You install this little client on that computer, and then that can do a full bare metal backup to your network. The computer dies, flakes out, hard drive crashes. You just put in a new hard drive and restore the image over the network back to that hard drive. And it's completely free, and it is schedulable. You can
Sounds
schedule.
right to me. That sounds right
Okay.
to me.
Okay. You can schedule the backups. So this can really be a pretty hands-off thing, and it's completely free. I believe this was not free, and they basically took their paid product and made a free backup and made a free version of it. And it also works on Mac, Windows, and BSD. Now, the only hook or crook is with this version you download, you can only support 2 computers. So if you have 3 or more computers in your house, you're going to have to roll the dice and just pick 2 of them.
Well, let me ask you this. When you first started talking about this, you said it was an application that ran on your computer. So therefore, I thought that it was a Linux app that ran on a Linux computer. And now you're telling me that it also works on Mac or Windows. So it's not explain that to me. Am I missing something here?
No. I believe it's actually a 2-parter app. A lot of apps have, and I don't want to call it client server structure, but I guess it is client server structure. The server in the back is Linux. The client that you can run on the desktops where the backups are, on the server where the backups are being stored is Linux. On the computers that are being backed up can be Linux, Windows, Mac, or BSD. Their client that loads onto those, you can load on any one of them. So I thought that was really cool. I like cross-platform stuff, So I thought that was really cool. Okay, this next link, I honestly don't know how credible this is, but I wanted to mention it anyway. And it was actually, I saw it on a couple websites. I just picked this one at techeye.net. And what they're basically saying is the supreme marketing man for Microsoft Open Solutions Group has basically said our cloud business infrastructure relies on running Linux.
Back the truck up a second. You're telling me that Microsoft does its cloud-based activities on Linux boxes?
No, and that's why this headline was very misleading. And everyone I saw was very misleading. What this really is Microsoft wants to encourage enterprises to run their cloud backend on Microsoft, okay, using the hypervisor technology, which is kind of like VMware. Microsoft has hired people, paid people to submit code to the Linux kernel to make sure Linux kernels would run good in Microsoft hypervisor. So what they're really saying is Microsoft's cloud business is not biased. They're trying to give the impression of being non-biased and supporting multiple operating systems. They don't want to lose business by saying, no, we only support Microsoft, which in my eyes is a huge step. Back in the day, companies didn't want to acknowledge other companies even existed to show, competition, because they don't want to give them the benefit of being acknowledged that they're a real threat kind of thing. For Microsoft to come out and say this, to me, acknowledges to a large group of Microsoft boys that Linux is not just something for your TiVo. This is going to be very prominent in the future of cloud operating systems, and even to enterprise and Microsoft networks.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I just found this was kind of shocking, so I just wanted to share this with the people. And this was from Microsoft Supreme Marketing Man for Microsoft's Open Solutions Group, where they're trying to coexist with open source in different ways.
Web servers and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of
Yep.
web servers, is there anything new in the news about Linux-based web servers?
Well, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. It's really not new, but it's new to me, Doc. I heard I know I heard this name years ago, and it never stuck with me. And then like 3 weeks ago, I ran across NGINX, or pronounced Nginx, where if you're from, I don't know, I guess Virginia, Nginx, Nginx. I don't know. But this is a super slim, high performance web server and reverse proxy server product that actually is being ran on 6% of the top million websites. So this is not something, inconsequential. And I've had two people say on their home network they run it because it's so quick, it's so easy, it's so small, it's so non-demanding to set up and get running. I've never played with it. I've always just used a Apache, because that's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to go to the store and get, soda. It's always Coke or Pepsi, and then you come to find out there's RC, and it's actually
Mm-hmm.
making money and being a good business. Nginx seems like that kind of thing for me. I mean, once in a while I need to break, and I want to try this. I want to play with this. I want to see it, but I'm not going to lie, Doc. I don't understand the term reverse proxy server.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
I know. I mean, I know what a proxy server is. A proxy server is a device that mediates my traffic out to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So a reverse proxy server would mediate traffic from the internet, I guess.
Well, we'll have to Google it after the show.
Yeah,
But
because Google.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
I'm curious myself.
yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna load it in a VM just to play with it. I don't expect it to be as featured rich as Apache. But here's the kicker. When you take out features, you A, become lighter, quicker, but B, you actually become more safe and more secure because you don't support all these other technologies. I mean, like the safest browser right now, if you want somebody to browse the internet and be completely safe, you give them a command line browser, because it ain't
Mm-hmm.
going to run no JavaScript. It ain't going to run no Flash. It ain't going to run no Java. And they have nothing to worry about. They're not going
Mm-hmm.
to be exploited ever. So it's kind of like that.
I got a
Okay.
question for you. Speaking of Google, Google's got a reputation for being a pretty fun company to work for. No matter what we have company, they seem to be a fun company to work for. Um, I imagine that the whole Linux development community is like this as well. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I'll say, I think the reason why Google's fun is because the people really want to get there. They really want to work there. Um, the Linux Foundation and the people who are really behind the real powerhouse of Linux production and marketing, they're there because they want to be there. It's not because that job, over at the Quickie Mart didn't come through. Let me go work over here, kind of attitude. So to be honest, it really seems like the people I've seen write blog posts or talk about working at the Linux Foundation, they're beyond giddy. It's like a kid in a candy store. They got that golden ticket. you know, and now they're on their way. There's a guy by the name of Jared Blouse. Blouse. I think it's Blouse. And he basically went through a little thing and he was explaining what Linux meant to him, why he believes better patent outcomes are powered by Linux. And patents is a big, long thing. What it means to be open source, and then looking back and moving forward through the whole thing. What I liked was one of his quotes in this article. When I first started using Linux, installation was difficult and it wasn't easy to find drivers. Real quick, he used the word drivers to be more understandable. In Linux, they're usually called modules, not drivers, but that's here or there. Okay. It wasn't easy to find drivers for the hardware, but times have really changed. Now it is as easy to install as Windows, and it does everything that the average computer user needs to do. Of course, it also does much more. And for the ambitious developers like Jared, it's the foundation upon which a whole world of innovation is built. I'll say I love the fact that he was very honest. I can say in my short time of using Linux, which is only now, I think, 5 years, 6 years, I have seen insane amounts of leaps and bounds in hardware support, usability, software development, software choices, and software stability. 5 years ago, man, getting Wi-Fi to work, you had to basically take chicken bones and do some voodoo to get them to work. It was so difficult. Software back in the day, I'm not going to say it was crashy, but it seemed twitchy, buggy, a fair amount of it. Wine, the Wine is not a emulator package. That one has increased in compatibility with Windows applications, to be honest, like 3 or 4 times over, where before 1 out of 10 times or so it would run the Windows application and run fine. Now it seems like 3 out of 4 Windows applications, it just runs perfectly fine, works absolutely great.
Why do you think Linux and other, well, for lack of a better term, alternative operating systems have been so slow to be picked up by even some of the more adventurous and technical computer users? They're just happy to stand pat with Windows or with Mac. Why aren't these alternative OSs catching on any more than they are?
I think it's one of those viral, quote unquote, things where it's really hard and difficult and tedious to build up that initial base. And then once you get to a certain level, you can't control it. It's going to grow and grow and grow. I think Linux is on the cusp of getting to that viral niche to where it's only going to get more popular. And the best way I can kind of explain this is, I think it was my dad said to me after the war with the Germans, the reason we were in Germany so long was because we had to wait for all the old Nazi sympathizers to die, and for the kids who never knew about Nazism to grow up. I kind of feel that way, like about Linux in particular, where the kids of today are going to grow up when Linux already exists. So I think it will be more tangible for them to use. I think kids these days are also a lot more hip about money and how much money is and how much stuff costs and how sometimes it's difficult to come across money. So I think when they get to that college age, they're going to be more appreciative of free office suites and open source software that they can utilize. Maybe it's just a pipe dream, but that's just one of the things I kind of believe. And you said alternate operating systems. A lot of people basically believe there's Windows, there's Mac, there's Linux, and there's BSD, and that's it. I got to tell you, I was actually given this link, and I want to say it was from Ray. And if I'm wrong, somebody's gonna be mad at me. But it was from Technologizer. Man, these words, Technologizer.com, and it's the secret world of alternate operating systems. They basically list 12 operating systems that are not Linux, they're not Mac, they're not Windows, and they're not BSD. Now, some of them, like the very first one called OpenGEM. OpenGEM, GM stands for Graphical Environment Manager. It's based upon MS-DOS, like free DOS. So this is a very basic operating system for a very basic set of computer hardware. That's the nicest way I can put it, like 286 style hardware. But if you go through the list, there is a heavy mishmash, I'll say, of extremely light and not complex operating systems like that OpenGen, and then there is definitely stuff that's more geared for today's hardware. Some of them resemble Mac a little bit. Some of them look like the old Windows 3.1. Some of them look a lot like your typical Linux desktop. I think they actually have one in here that I think is Linux, and it's called React OS. I thought it was Linux, but they're making it sound like it is something totally unique. I'm honestly not 100% sure, but I will go with what they say. The real quick now add, the one I didn't see in here is actually, it's called Hurd, Hurd. And what it really is, it's an alternate kernel besides Linux. Hurd is completely free, completely open source. For instance, Linux has support for closed source drivers for your wireless cards. Hurd is only supporting completely free products. So if you have the correct hardware, then you actually can use that. If you don't have completely open hardware, using a Hurd kernel could be difficult to get things that you like up and running. But yeah, React OS is number 11 on the list. All this operating system's goal is to look, feel, to be basically a clone of Windows NT style operating systems, including XP. Their goal from the very beginning to the very end is to make that transition for the Windows users as smooth as possible, as painless as possible, as comfortable as possible. Notice I've never suggested anyone runs that because I don't think it has enough depth or user base for the new user to really use.
Plus, it sounds like it's really dumbing down its product too.
Yeah,
they're dumbing down their own product.
Yeah, they're limiting themselves, I'll say.
Yes.
And the number 12, I have to mention, he's no relation to me. There's a, it's called Visiopsys, Visiopsys, and it's made by Andy McLaughlin. And if he's a relative of mine, I didn't know he was a relative of mine.
It's a name you can trust.
I don't know about that. Um, and to be honest, number 13 on the list is the one that I really, really, really want to see get more users and get more popular. It's called Haiku. There was an operating system called BOS, BE-OS. I'm sorry, BEOS. It was basically stopped. Haiku is the totally open implementation of that operating system. What I like about this operating system is everything in it is multi-threaded. And what I mean by that is
Hmm.
if you have a window with two buttons, each button is assigned their own thread. Everything is its own thread. I don't remember what the podcast was like a year ago. I heard them mention it. I heard them say how utterly um, light this ran, even when doing process intensive stuff, and I kind of didn't believe them. So I started a VM. I gave it 114 megabytes of RAM. Okay. 114 megs of RAM, not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of RAM. I loaded this, I installed this in the VM. I then started a 720p quality video. And I had that running. And then I loaded a OpenGL style demonstration of a translucent cube that you could very easily spin in all kinds of different
Mm-hmm.
directions. And when I first loaded it up, the video was still running fine, but the cube was running slow and very slow to react. I simply went up to the main menu, and it's 2 clicks away to where you can very easily on a slider change the priority on any thread in the operating system. And there were hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just basically clicked to sort, and I saw what was asking for the most processing power and was not getting it. And that was my cube. I just simply dragged the slider. All of a sudden, the cube became instantaneously responsive to the nth degree. I could do anything
Mm-hmm.
super fast, super slow, flick, flick, flick. And the video never once hiccuped displaying 720p video.
Hmm.
The bad thing about this operating system was it didn't support any flash whatsoever, and its Wi-Fi support was very lacking. It existed, but it didn't do work on any of my hardware, so I basically couldn't run it. I like what this operating system promises it can be. I'm perfectly satisfied with Linux. I'm not saying I need Haiku, but I like the underdog, and I think I would like playing with that one.
Yeah, it's worth a shot. Speaking of
Absolutely.
speaking of playing, what's new in the world of Linux gaming? You got anything on that?
Well, there's actually, I want to say, like 3 links I didn't put in the show that built up over the last couple of weeks. There's really 2 groups I want to talk about real quick. The one is a product in a new product game coming out called Zero AD, and it's still in the alpha stages. But I gotta say, even in the alpha stage, this thing is catching a lot of traction because of the graphic quality and the way that they say the gameplay is going to go. Everybody swears this is going to be a pretty popular Linux game once it actually comes out and gets going. Again, it's called Zero, the number 0 AD, and you can add it to your Ubuntu install via PPA. I would encourage people to not do this on a production machine, only because sometimes these high intensive games can request that you change video settings. And if you change them
Mm-hmm.
and you don't remember what you changed, you might be in a little pain trying to figure out how to set them back.
Is this doing anything with graphics under the with the Linux platform that hasn't been done before, or it's doing it differently?
I don't want to say it's never been done before. I think it's partially um, the amount of work they're doing, and I cannot remember what they said they were going to use. Can't remember what technology they said they were going to use, but it's been used before, but it doesn't seem like it's popular. I want to say open. It is not OpenGL. No, I cannot remember.
Okay. Well,
Um,
go ahead.
good. I was gonna say, and the second part of the topic, it's actually three links, and I know that's cheap and cheesy cheating, but it's 18 of the best free up and coming Linux games.
Did you
Uh,
say free?
Absolutely free, and they're up and coming. So anything that's in this list is not out yet. It's basically in development or in heavy development, I'll say. They're all at linuxlinks.com. There is some games in here like Tux Football. It's a arcade style 2D football game. That's not going to get a lot of people hot and bothered, I'll say. But there is more than a couple games on this list if you go look at. There's actually one here that's a Grand Theft Auto clone that
Hmm.
they're actually touting pretty high that it's going to be pretty popular. Um,
And these will
and
continue to be free after they're out of development?
as far as what I'm reading here, everything is planning on being free.
Oh, that's great.
Um, One of them is called Vertigo, and it's like a tunnel racing kind of game that people say is gorgeous. I didn't install it just because I haven't had a lot of time in my hands, but it definitely seems really cool.
Hmm.
I definitely encourage people, if you have any gaming enthusiasm at all, to go check out linuxlinks.com, and it's 18 of the best free up and coming Linux games, part 1 of 3, part 2 of 3, part 3 of 3. This is the site, if you've been there before, everything it seems like is a list of 6. The best 6 text editors, the best 6 racing games, the best 6 graphic editors,
Mhm.
and so forth and so on.
Instead of a top 10 list, they have a top 6 list, huh?
Yeah. Yep, and everything's top 6. Um, that's all the topics I really have for tonight, Doc.
Well, you're ready to listen to an email that we got in?
Sure, sure,
Uh,
absolutely.
this is from Wes RK. And he's talking about our conversation that we had last week about the so-called Mac malware, which you said was not really malware, but it could be considered as malware by some people. Uh, Wes RK tells us regarding that Mac malware that it is technically malware according to Wikipedia. And he gives the link to Wikipedia. Look up malware on Wikipedia. He said it defined malware as programming like code, scripts, active content, and other software that is designed to disrupt or deny operation, gather information that leads to loss of privacy or exploitation, gain unauthorized access to system resources, and other abusive behavior. Now, Wikipedia also goes on to say that malware includes computer viruses, computer worms, Trojan horses, spyware, dishonest adware, and I think that's kind of funny. To me, all adware is dishonest.
Yeah.
Uh, Scareware, crimeware, most rootkits, and other malicious and unwanted software or programs. West goes on to say, that being said, I agree with you that this is basically harmless to Mac users except to the CC stuff. Also, seems to me that most Mac users that were infected were those that came from the Windows world. LOL. How can you blame them? They are used to being deceived by their computers. Hee hee. Great work on the show, Door. Keep it up.
Yeah. We also had a second email from Michael, who kind of said the same thing. He basically said, let me see here. I think I got it. Um, the difficulty of removal is in no way a valid metric of measuring if a certain program is malware. The term malware is short for malicious software, and the fake antivirus request payment in order to remove fake viruses from your computer most certainly falls into that category. Doors rant on users giving their admin passwords. Anything that pops up has been rendered moot. The Mac Defender software has evolved into Mac Guard, which does not require the user to type in a password. I'll first say my crystal ball was off. I'm sorry, I couldn't see the software would morph into not needing a root password. But I'll say both these guys are exactly right. I kind of did make it clear that when I was saying malware, I kept saying what I consider malware to be. And I will say, I do not think I was thinking entirely correctly. I do agree with what Wikipedia say, how it's code, scripts, action, content, and other software designed to disrupt or deny operations.
Mhm.
I definitely agree with that. And I definitely will say, with that definition, then I can say, yes, it is malware. I will say, to the normal Windows tech, there is a clear differentiation between Trojans, viruses, malwares, worms, and those kind of things. It, to me, really was, I just kept thinking of it as ransomware. And
Mhm.
ransomware is just something that tries to get money out of you. Um, this does install something, so it does go a touch further. It is designed to disrupt, and that seems to be the biggest thing. Now, with that said, there are plenty of types of malware that their plan is to not disrupt your processes, but to just hijack and overtake them. But I will definitely want to thank Wes and Michael for taking the time to write the emails. You are both more right than I was last week, I'll say, because you guys took the time to actually look it up, read, and reflect on the actual facts behind it.
Well, that's well said, Dor. It takes a big man to admit that he might have said something wrong, or definitely said something wrong. So you just moved even higher up on the estimation scale that I have for you.
Well, I mean, one of my core beliefs is I do not know everything. I will not know everything, and I begged people in the like episode 2, if I say something wrong, please don't let me continue to believe what I said is correct. Please send me an email correcting me. The biggest thing I fear is spreading a falsehood to people who honestly don't know any better, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I would rather people send me 20 correction emails a week than never getting a single correction email, because then I think nobody's listening.
There you go. There you go. That's absolutely true. Well, have you got anything else before we close out tonight?
I really wanted to thank everybody in the podnutz forums, for wishing me happy birthday, and all the people on Facebook. I gotta say, I found the perfect use for Facebook. You simply join, you put in your birth date, you had your friends and your relatives, and you never use it again until it's your birthday, until people say happy birthday. And that's about all I find Facebook good for.
Page for my business, and it's starting to get traction. Uh, I'll let you know how it works out in the long run, but I haven't gotten any business out of it yet, but it's only been running for probably about a week. But I'm happy with the way it's coming along.
Very
Well,
cool.
that about does it for Linux for the rest of us. This has been episode number 45. I do believe we'll be doing one next week because I'm not planning on going anywhere, and Door's already had his vacation for the year. So I think we'll be back next week, won't we, Dor?
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up. If you have any questions, email us. Your email is door to door geek at podnutz.com, correct?
Yep,
And
yep.
is that two, the number two, or the word to?
DOORTODOORGEEK.
Okay, so it's not the number two, it's the word to door to
Yep.
door geek at podnutz.com. Well, folks, we'll see you next week. And if you have any questions or comments, or you want to send money or baked goods, you know how to get a hold of us. Dor, I'll see you next week, buddy.
Have a good week, Doc.
Okay, so long, everybody.